Hi guys, my name's Pamela Denny, and I own a little company called Stellar Joy Co., where I am the lead life coach and motivational speaker. I wanted to hop on today and have a little chat with you guys about kind of the crazy that's going on in the world right now. I mean, we're just kind of starting to wedge ourselves out from under this big COVID-19 pandemic, and we're being released out into the world to protest and rioting and big conversations about really big social issues while we're facing a social issue brought upon us by this pandemic. And I think right now is a really great time to have some really good, honest conversation about what is happening. I think as a white woman, when things like this start occurring, when we see somebody, anybody in any of our communities being murdered in the streets at the hands of law enforcement while onlookers are watching, that's a really gut-wrenching story. To hear that there is a man in the streets of America begging a police officer for air and his mother. There's a really big systemic problem there. And I know for myself, just being a white woman, when things like this happen, a lot of the times I think we just want to kind of cower away and not have the discussion because it's uncomfortable. Because we have to take accountability and become responsible for the way that our society is, for the way that our culture grows. And when I had first heard the term Black Lives Matter, I'm just as guilty as so many other innocent people, and thinking, wait a minute, all lives matter. What makes your life more important than my life, or than my niece's life, or than my mother's life? Well, it would turn out that's exactly the question of the movement. Why is my life more important than your life? Why do I have this white privilege? And let me tell you, as a white person, hearing the words white privilege makes me also feel a little bit defensive. Like, I'm being attacked for being white. That's just the honest to God truth. And maybe that makes your skin crawl, and I'm not my intention. I just think that we need to have some really honest conversations about race in the United States. So I have come to the understanding that there do need to be hashtags and signs and billboards and protest boards and a huge movement exclaiming that Black Lives Matter. I get it. It took me some time, but after really sitting down and reading and researching and hearing all the things, all the uncomfortable things that us as white people need to hear, I totally get it. And it is a conversation that we do need to have and continue having. A couple years ago, I was watching, I think it was David Letterman's After the Show series that he did with guests, and he was talking with Jay-Z about Donald Trump, our president. And Jay-Z had said, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but we are talking about racism now, and that is a conversation that needs to be had. So that's happening, and that's a great thing. And I agree with that. I think we have to have conversations, uncomfortable conversations about uncomfortable things. And for me, the Black Lives Matter was a little uncomfortable until I actually engaged in the research and came to understand that it doesn't mean their life is more valuable than yours or mine. It means, why isn't their life as valuable as yours or mine? So, yesterday I spent about 2 hours researching white privilege because, as a white person, like I said, this was something that just brought a level of defensiveness to me. Like, wait a minute. I love all people, and I don't think that I'm gifted some special privilege because I'm white. Well, Jesus is white. Mary Poppins is white. Even the Easter Bunny's white. Santa Claus is white. Peter Pan is white. Um, think of any great classic childhood movie. Home Alone would be mine. White kid. So I don't think that I have white privilege, but I do. And if you're white, you have white privilege also. So after watching these series of lectures yesterday, I started trying to find a way to relay what white privilege was to me in a way that I could make sense out of, to ensure that if I do have white privilege, I can engage with it in a meaningful way. So the best way for me to intake that information and spew it back out in a meaningful way is, I read this book a couple years ago called The Talon Code, and it was written by a gentleman named Daniel Coyle. He also wrote a book called The Culture Code. So he does a lot of research and talks a lot in the space about sociology, and specifically spatial sociology. So how do we relate to the imagery that we see around us? How do we relate to environments? What does this structure say to you? Generally, people who live near a library are more likely to engage with that library. If you see SWAT cars and battering rams and things that look like war, your brain believes that there will be war here. So just how our brains kind of translate information. So he wrote about this research study where they took these 4 kids in grade school, and they took them to the school and told the administrators and the teachers that these 4 children were brilliant children. They're geniuses, they'll excel at anything, they're really special, gifted children. And they were instructed to also let the classmates know that these children were gifted children. So at the end of that school year, what happened? Well, those 4 children excelled. And they excelled just because somebody said they were going to. There was no truth to the idea or the concept that these kids were geniuses. They were 4 randomly chosen average students. And they were just presented as being gifted. And so people treated them that way. And then they excelled. So when these students weren't grasping concepts or weren't grasping the activities, the classmates and the administrators were then forced to look back at themselves and see how they could be more effective at communicating the lesson or the information and providing resources to these students to ensure that they excelled and met their full potential, which is a potential of being a gifted person. So for me, that's how I have come to understand white privilege. No, I don't need somebody to walk in the door ahead of me and say, hey, here comes a white lady, she knows everything, treat her accordingly. What it dispels for me is that there are lessons taught in schools. There are things and structures and signs out in society that say the knowing is the whiteness. The people empowered are the people with white skin. the people with magic abilities are the people with white skin. So the founders of this great country that you're living inside of, they had white skin also. The presidents and the congressmen and the people who represent this country also have white skin. So, uh, social media, the news, our society at large flashes all these panoramic images in front of all of us all day long. And they tell the rest of society that white people are privileged. And so we are. And so we are treated as such. So the best thing we can do with our white privilege is to raise the voices of the people who don't have the means or the resources to have their voices heard on these higher platforms. So, yes, the term white privilege makes my skin crawl a little bit, but that doesn't make it not exist. That doesn't make it not real. That means it's something that I need to be intentional about and I need to pay attention to. So I'm not stepping on other people, so that I am using my privilege to raise people up and ensure that their voices are heard. So I think when things like this happen in our society and there are riots and there is conversations about racism, white people tend to bow out because it's uncomfortable, because I didn't choose white privilege. Well, people of color didn't choose slavery either. It's something that occurred in history. And one of the greatest things I saw yesterday while I was watching these TED Talks was these girls talking about, why do we talk about it like it's this thing that happened in history? And why aren't we talking about it like this thing that is happening today? I mean, for me to think about sitting down children and telling them that they need to behave in public, that comes more from a concern of what other people are going to think, more so than a concern that somebody's going to take my freedom. Somebody could take your freedom just because you're misbehaving. Not a concept that I grew up with, not something I have any intimate relationship with at all. So, if I want to go for a walk at dark and it's kind of a skeevy city, the thing that I'm terrified about is either a stray dog coming and attacking me in the middle of a city street, or, somebody on drugs doing something to harm me. I'm certainly not concerned about a police officer taking my freedom from me. So that's very different. That is a conversation to have. That is something we need to discuss and talk about. So these girls told a lot of stories about things that are happening right now, today. They're not things that happen in history. They're a part of history, but slavery and racism is not this thing that happened in the past and we've moved beyond it. Martin Luther King Jr. started a movement, and it's our job to continue moving. So George Floyd died in the streets at the hands of somebody who should have been protecting him. So let's not continue doing that to our people, to our neighbors, to our community members, to humanity. When something makes us feel uncomfortable, we need to ask questions and be willing to engage in those conversations, because just because it doesn't personally affect you does not mean that it's not indirectly affecting you. So if we can raise up every member of our community to have a voice, to be heard, to be seen, we all win. We all learn more. We all become better people. So I hope if you're a white person and the term white privilege bothered you, I hope this video makes sense and clarifies what white privilege is exactly. And you don't have to choose it to have it. But if you're white, you have it. So use your voice, use your space, and help these other voices be heard. Take care of each other. Be kind. Stay stellar, friends. Thanks for being here. Bye.